me over Resident Evil.
Nope.
That's interesting.
Good point.
Okay, so my internet's just rubbish, I think. So yeah, Dino Crisis was my next choice. I mean, not
sorry. You just sounded really drunk there.
Oh man! Sorry, it's because your screen is choppy. So, and it happens with me at work when my screen's.
Good evening, Nerdaholics. Here we are talking about our favourite games through time.
Hello there, and Tom has rejoined us. Say hello, Tom. Hello.
Bastard.
Excellent. Perfect introduction. This is what I was saying to you before, like before we've been on air about. It might not be a game that you two, you may have heard of it. I could be underestimating you, but this one is Alex Kidd in Miracle World. So
I do know it. I do know it.
I know it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So basically, it's got. It's a bit of a. I'm going to turn my sort of soft bastard side here. So it was the first ever game and console that my mum got me. Must have been about, again, 6 or something like that. Yeah, on the Master System too, and it was built into the Master System. So for like ages, it was just that game that I had. And it was like precursor to like Sonic for later on kind of thing. It was like Sega's mascot for a little while until Sonic came in. Yeah, and some of the bits were like fucking terrified me. Like there's this bit where you go into like this like weird haunted castle. Well, I think it's called the Redaxian Castle or something. And it has this weird, like every level before then has got this sort of happy music. And then you go into this castle, it's like so it's like that was the first game I remember I had that actually like legit scared me. Yeah,
is it like I know the game you're talking about? I don't ever recall playing it. Was it like a platforming?
Yeah,
game?
Platforming game. Yeah, so it was like I say, it was kind of like it was weird. Even like the noise that he makes when you jump was pretty much the same noise as Sonic. It was like whoop, whoop. And I mean, the controls were pretty simple. It was just like you only had 2 buttons on the Master System. Controller anyway.
I never had a Master System. I knew people who had Master Systems. Yeah. And I think I vaguely remember them playing it. So and that game has like a lot of nostalgia feel for you as well.
Massive. Yeah. Because I say I can't really remember a game that I played before then. So I mean that was like really early. So yeah, and it was quite fun, you know, just going into like these little areas, and then like he had this. His power was like he had like a super like strong punch. Yeah, so he could just break blocks and like kill dragons with like one fist and stuff like that. I can't remember the names of the other ones, but it was on different consoles as well. So I think there was a version on the NES, and then it went up. Then there was another one on like the SNES and stuff like that. But yeah, that was the only one I played. But mainly for like nostalgia and the fact that it was, and even like Sega have said this was like their original mascot until Sonic came along, and you can kind of tell the similarities slightly. He's not as fast as Sonic, obviously, or a hedgehog, yeah. So that would probably be one of my earliest memories, and it was a lot of fun. And actually, there's quite a few videos on YouTube just going through like a retrospective of it, which are it's quite entertaining. Just like, oh yeah, memories coming back and stuff. So that's one of mine. Look at his hands. Oh no!
Oh no, you're back.
No, he's back.
Sorry. I did. You both froze. I was like,
Harry, you literally stopped
like that.
Yeah, Dragon Crystal on the Sega Game Gear.
Oh, the Game Gear. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was the Game Gear was the first thing that I ever, as a family, we ever owned. But it is the beginnings of every RPG that has ever existed afterwards.
Yeah.
Because what you would do is you start off as a little man who's got a big fucking giant dragon egg follows him around, and the dungeons are laid out so effectively it's like this forest, and it'll be a forest, a big square, and then you have to fight random monsters in it, and then you go through like a maze, and it's like you open up more and more of the map, and then you go through a door, and then you end up on the next level. You collect items, and it'll be like red ring, blue ring, yellow ring, and you don't find out what they do until you actually put them on. And then it tells you Ring of Life or Ring of Things, or sometimes you pick up a cursed item that you can't take off, and it gives you a minus stat, and you have to wander around until you can get rid of it and get like. There's just so much random stuff in there that was like, there's so much detail, honestly. game. But yeah, the game would get to a point where you get to like the 4th or 5th level, and then the enemies become so unfair.
Oh, really?
Like these ninjas that just fire ninja stars at you at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you can't get out of the way. And stuff that if you touch it and are trying to attack it, it then will explode and kill you straight away. I was like, oh, it's a nightmare of a game. But it's one of my earliest fond memories is that even the little details, like when you got different weapons, they were different colours. So the better they are, the more like different colour that it would appear on the screen, and that was like, oh, blew my tiny little mind. Bearing in mind, you know, the Game Boy had no colour. It was suddenly got this coloured screen on it.
I think the Game Gear had a backlight as well, so you could play it wherever. Whereas the Game Boy had to be, in a certain light for it to work properly. Yeah. I had a Game Gear as well, and the one thing I remember about it required 6 AA batteries, whereas the Game Boy only required the plug of it was, if you decided to plug it into the wall, the plug was like you couldn't plug anything else in. Yeah.
I mean, I did love the Game Gear version of Sonic. That was amazing.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I remember my cousin had one.
Ridiculously hard.
Well, funny enough, that leads quite nicely into my first gaming experience. It is Sonic. And I remember I was staying at my grandparents' a house in Birmingham at the time, and my uncle was still living with them. And he came home one day, and I knew he had like a Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis, if you're in America. And he came home, and he had just bought like the Mega CD, or the Sega CD. I saw under his arm, he had Sonic CD. Because I saw the artwork. It's that artwork where Sonic and Metal Sonic are like, the sort of butting heads with each other. And he said, do you want to come and give this a go? Like the new Sonic game has just come out.
Yeah.
We went upstairs and he had it was like the definition of a man cave back then. Man caves. And he had like these massive, big, very long rectangular speakers as well. And he plugged it in, put the game in, and I swear to God, I remember it so well. I was sitting on the end of his bed and I was just looking at the screen. And then the Sega logo appeared, and then the title screen comes up, and the music, he cranked it, blew me like halfway across the room, and I thought, this is the coolest shit I've ever seen in my life. The combination of Sonic's design, he's like one of the best designed game characters of anybody, like him, and it's instantly recognizable. It was a combination of how bright and colourful it looked. And because it was on the Mega CD, the graphics were slightly improved as well, because it was running off a disc, not a cartridge, like the Mega Drive games were. And the music, was just unbelievable. And then when you start playing it, I can still remember playing through that entire game with him from, the beginning of Palm Tree Panic and the intro video, where he's running through to get to Little Planet. That was edited which was animated by Toei Animation. So if you know Dragon Ball, Toei Animation. And right up to like the race with Metal Sonic and things like that. Just everything clicked with me. And within the space of a couple of days, because I kept dying, I was 6 years old, I wasn't very good at playing it, so I'd watch him play it. Yeah. And I begged my parents to get me a Mega Drive. And one Christmas, I opened it up. I still remember freaking out where I saw it because they bought Sonic 3 with it. Yeah. Loved it. Then went back and bought Sonic 2, and then I bought Sonic 1. And then literally a couple of months after Sonic 3 came out, they released like Sonic and Knuckles, which was like the second half of Sonic 3. You could like combine the cartridges together. Because I didn't have like a Super Nintendo, so I never really grew up. I mean, I've played them all now, but I never grew up really playing Mario or Zelda or Metroid or anything like that. I've now gone back and played all those games. So Sonic to me was like the gaming god to me. Yeah. I loved everything about it.
Because around that time as well, I sort of started getting into like the Mega Drive side of things. I didn't actually have one myself, but my dad, because I used to see him every weekend, and he'd be like, which leads in quite nicely to the next pick, which is he got like a load of games for it, but he never had Sonic for some reason. But anyway, was this game called Desert Strike?
Oh yeah, Desert Strike, yeah. That's got a great soundtrack.
Yeah, that's basically the main reason why I put it on my list, because of the introduction. So, absolutely not. This is what's in my notes.
Quality choice.
Desert Strike, mainly for the theme and first Mega Drive game I played with my dad. So again, little soft spot there. And fun helicopter Gulf War shooty game as well. And it was definitely a sort of, not to say inspired, but it was pretty much like a goal.
I would say it was quite innovative at the time, like being able to get the actual movements right with the helicopter on such an old system. Exactly. Great.
And even when like you sort of embark on each mission, you're on like the frigate and you take off from the frigate, and then there's different like times of day you play it as well, which really kind of change the atmosphere of the game as you go on. And also like some of the villains and the weapons in particular that would always like sort of shoot at you if you were going near it, like the rapier ones, which were like they're like the green cylindrical machines which would fire missiles at you. They were fucking loud, man. It was like every time you go near one, it's like
yeah,
and I was just like, oh shit. There were plenty of jump scares in that for that reason. And the weapons on it as well, on the actual Apache, I think was it a Comanche, or I think it was an Apache helicopter.
It's an Apache.
First one, yeah. And I thought it was really cool because I think there was, from what I remember, there was like 4 campaigns, and within each campaign there were like 4 like submissions. And they were quite varied. So like one of them, you'd have to go and destroy like this like nuclear power plant that's been overtaken by terrorists and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then like you'd have like rescue missions, or you'd have like a winch, and then you go to someone who's missing in action, and then you pick them up. And then in order to refuel, you have to go and get fuel tanks and ammo packs and stuff. And I thought it was quite, looking back at it now, I was like, bloody hell, for like a, what was it? Was it 8-bit at the time? 16-bit?
16-bit,
yeah.
16-bit.
Mega Drive, Mega Drive,
yeah.
Yeah, 16-bit.
Yeah, it was just like, cool, this was
I
like the precursor.
Like the fact that if you bug it up, you could just go and fly around the map.
Yeah,
you didn't have a mission over.
No, because it was...
Until you failed, but it wouldn't let you stop. You could just be still flying around.
Yeah, it was kind of, because you could go to like, you were supposed to sort of you didn't have to, but ideally you do them in like a chronological order. But you could like somehow like find yourself on like the last mission of like the campaign, and you're like, shit, I'm nowhere nearly power enough for this. I've got no armor, my fuel's gone. And I always remember my dad like singing, doing like the dan da dan dan dan. And I was sort of looking like, oh, okay. And then obviously I got used to playing it, and I was like, yeah, this is really bloody good. And I played it maybe a couple of years ago on an emulator. I was like, yeah, this was quite ahead of its time, I thought, and kind of went under the radar a bit.
Desert Strike and Jungle Strike are classics.
Yeah, and Jungle Strike did come out.
Strike, on the other hand.
Yeah, Desert Strike and Jungle Strike particularly were great. And like with Jungle Strike, it was even more. It wasn't out that much. It wasn't like years and years until that came out after the first one. It was literally like a year, and it almost felt like it could belong on like a more powerful content. It upgraded really well, but I've chosen the first one because it was the one that sort of set the trend for the series, and it was really bloody cool, so as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking chronologically, the next game that blew my mind would be Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, nice.
It's got to be the Mega Drive version, though.
Oh yeah,
has to.
The best version of that game.
100%.
I'm just blown away by how many different finishing moves, how they can make 2D pixeled characters
brutal,
like, so brutal.
Yeah.
With like ripping each other's spines out, doing the uppercuts where they fly down and land on the spikes. Blood in games was never a big thing until Mortal Kombat.
No, Mortal
and then
Kombat
you would have had to have typed in a code to get the blood on as well.
The gore, I mean, obviously we look at it now and we don't think anything of it, but at the time it was considered really, really gory, like incredibly violent.
It was like sort of like a nightmare version of Street Fighter, wasn't it? You know what I mean? It's like you had that, but then Mortal Kombat just took it to the next level in terms of like brutality.
I just always preferred Mortal Kombat's fighting style over
Street Fighter.
Street Fighter. I preferred the characters.
Yeah,
there's nothing cooler than Scorpion and Sub-Zero.
Because the first one you have limited characters, a bit like Street Fighter. Nobody really talks about the first Street Fighter game. Everybody just goes on about how amazing Street Fighter 2 is. And it is a damn good game, but I side with you on that. I always prefer, mainly because I didn't have a Super Nintendo.
Exactly.
Mortal Kombat was like the answer to Street Fighter. But even like the game looked like visually very different as well, because it was all like the way they did the character models. I think those are like real people dressed up.
Yeah, the pictures of real people.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the process is called, but it was the first time it was done. Apart from I can't think of the other game that did it before then, but it was the first definitely beat 'em up that used that same sort of 2D style.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. It's now probably my favorite gaming franchise of all time, but my introduction to it was Final Fantasy VII.
Hey.
No surprise to you two.
No.
And I could spend literally hours talking to you about how much I love this game and why I love it so much. And funnily enough, it's not actually my favorite in the franchise. That title goes to Final Fantasy IX. But Final Fantasy VII had such a huge impact on me. I remember going over to my friend's house, he had it, and the first thing I was blown away by was there's 3 discs. How big is this game?
How is this even possible?
Yeah, 3 discs. That entire intro, you know, when you see like Aerith's face, and then there's like the camera zooms out, you see the big city of Midgar. I think it was the first ever FMV I ever saw. And it would zoom out, and then you would see the city of Midgar, then the big logo would appear, and it was all synchronized with the music, and then it would zoom back in to the train platform, where you're introduced to all the characters, and that amazing music just kicks in. And the thing that I loved as well is that you could change the characters' names as well. So you could call Cloud, I don't know, Tom or Harry or Sean or whatever.
Yeah, you can basically have your own 2 teams.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Made it more immersive, didn't it?
I mean, just to name a few bits, obviously the intro, the first time when you finally leave Midgar and you have like this massive map to explore, Sephiroth being built up to be this unstoppable monster. You have no idea how you're going to beat him. And the game's really clever because during the flashback scene, when Cloud tells you what happened at the Nibelheim incident, you actually play it. You're not just told or shown it, you actually play it. Like, you can go into the menu and look at Sephiroth's stats. And, you know, he's like, Cloud's level 1, Sephiroth's level 50. He's got all the best magic in the game. He's got, like, the best equipment and everything. He is jacked to the gills. Aerith's death, spoiler alert. And, you know, the big revelation with Cloud in the end. You know, there's just so many moments of that game. I've literally just touched on a handful of them.
Yeah.
But we'd be here all night if I did that. So Final Fantasy VII was my next big one.
It's funny. Final Fantasy VII, I have my memory of it is I was playing it at my mate's house.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get past the big robot.
Which one was it? Oh, the Guard Scorpion.
The Guard Scorpion. And I literally played it the first time, got through it, and then was just playing ahead. And then my mate walked in and he was like,
"How did you do that?
What's this? I've never seen any of this going on." It was really good. I mean, well, when did that game come out?
1997.
So I was 10.
Final Fantasy VII is notorious for having like grammatical errors and mistranslations and things like that. Because when you get into the Guard Scorpion fight, there's a point where it lifts its tail up. And if you attack it when it lifts its tail up, it will blast you with its lasers and cause like loads of damage. And what the mistranslation is, you have to quickly, let's attack it while its tail's up. So as a player, you're thinking, oh great, I've got to attack it, otherwise it's going to kill me, but it keeps attacking you anyway. What you're meant to do is not attack it and just wait for it to bring its tail back down. But because because it was so poorly translated, you know, you got all these people attacking it, and this thing's just like killing you. It's thinking, well, this is bullshit. How the hell are you meant to get past it?
Impossible!
Yeah. Well, Final Fantasy VII doesn't drop the tutorial on you until after the bombing mission. I could have done with that at the beginning.
Yeah. Kind of following on from like the PS1 era, Tom, you may already have this as well. Harry, you may potentially have it too. Is Metal Gear Solid 1.
Yes, that was the next one I was going to mention, but
sorry,
I think we can all join in on this one.
Yeah, definitely. So my first memory of this game was remembering someone actually just randomly talk about it, and this was still when I was in primary school. I think it was 1998 when it was released, and
yes, it was.
Because before then it was just like, you know, you had like beat 'em ups and you had, you know, your strategy games like Final Fantasy VII with the RPGs. But I never played a game which required you to really use like stealth as your main kind of weapon and guidance into the game. And it just blew me away really, because the next memory I had of it was I remember going around to my mate's house, and his brother actually had it, and we were just started about halfway through the game or something. Well, actually, it wasn't halfway through; it was quite early on in the game. Was the Psycho Mantis battle? I was just like, what? We were all really stuck because like none of us could work out what the hell we were supposed to do, because it was one of those weird fourth wall breaking moments where you're trying to avoid this, because this is like for a little what's the word I'm looking for, context. So basically you've got this weird gas mask wearing dude who can float and can read your mind, and then you're trying to like call the colonel on the codec, which again I'll go into the codec because that was another mind-blowing sort of thing for me as well. You literally like you're just trying to dodge this guy's attacks, but you can't actually really do it. Like the idea of what you're supposed to do, which is like call
slap me over the head with it.
Yeah, exactly.
I phoned him. It was like, I think it was like the 10th time I phoned him. It was like, dumbass, plug your controller into.
Why don't you try switching over the controller?
Yeah.
And I thought he was just taking a piss. I was like, what do you mean? What controller? How are you? Where's this controller in this game?
The funny part is that this will be several years after my first experience of Metal Gear Solid. I wasn't playing it. But I will go back to that. My experience of this, when I was playing this, I was playing in the second port. I didn't realise I was using the second controller anyway, all the way through the game. So when I got there, I was like, "This is supposed to be challenging. Like, I just need to be shooting the button." And I looked at the thing and I was like, "Oh, I'm using controller 2 anyway." I mean, I knew that was what you had to do, but it's just like I was using it. I was like, "This isn't as challenging as it was going on."
There's that moment when Mantis asks you to put your controller on the floor.
Yeah.
And because if it reads, you have like the DualShock controller, which had the vibration function, and that moment, because you're very young, obviously nowadays, you think, I can't believe I got shocked by it, but you put it on the floor, then he vibrates the controller. The controller vibrates so hard that it moves on the floor, and I was like, oh, Jesus Christ! What's going on? I was like, what is that? And then the battle begins, and then it acts as if your television has switched off and you just see Hideo in the top right-hand corner and you think, what is going on? Metal Gear Solid is a very grounded game until you're first introduced to Mantis, and that is the moment when Meryl runs away and it zooms in on her ass and everything like that. And then Mantis appears and he's floating in the air, and he's talking in riddles and things like that.
It's like an apparition, and you're like,
that's when
what the hell's going on?
Yeah, and that's when you realise your fairly grounded stealth game has become almost like got a real supernatural vibe to it. This is not quite how I was expecting it to be.
No.
But the version of the Metal Gear Solid I had didn't have the artwork on the back. I don't know why. I think someone lent me the case or I rented it. And instead of giving you the case, they put it in some random sleeve.
Yeah.
So I got it home, and so the Arms Tech president's telling you, oh yeah, her codec number's on the back of the CD case. I was thinking, what's that supposed to mean? I thought it was the optical disc
in the actual
and I was like thinking, what's this? And then I had no idea. And then I went into school the next day and I was thinking, no, you've got to look on the back of the CD case, like the physical case.
Yeah.
Back,
I don't have the physical case.
I don't have the case. I was like, good for you, I wrote it down. Oh, thank God for that.
One of many fourth wall breaking moments in that.
Yeah.
At that time, again, as a kid, you're not really aware of how these things work in terms of you didn't really see it much before, like the game actually directly giving you the player instructions, sort of separating the game like life from art kind of thing. Because like you say, Tom, it kind of starts off where it just feels like I wouldn't say like a routine kind of action game, but like you're infiltrating this base which has been taken over by terrorists, and they have a demand, and then if you don't reach the demands, and they'll set off a nuclear weapon. You go, all right, okay, this is kind of familiar, going back to like Desert Strike. It's like one of those kind of war games. And like you say, as you go on throughout the game and it progresses, and you start to find out the different members of the Foxhound unit, and for example, Sniper Wolf, she's just like a really, really deadly sniper, but she also has these wolves that literally follow her around, and you're like, okay, what's going on? Can she like
Yeah, she can go for days. Yeah, she can go for days without eating or sleeping.
Yeah. She just takes these like diazepam pills, and she's all right. And then
that was my first experience of the game, was watching my mate fight sniper wolves.
Oh right, nice.
Which one? The snowfield or at the tower?
The snowfield, when she had used the Nikita missile.
Yeah, I used the Nikita.
I was like,
because the sniper rifle controls like arse in that game.
It does really,
especially
bad,
when you run out of what are those pills called again?
Diazepam.
Yeah. And so I always used the Nikita all the time. It's quite funny. She can take 10 missiles to the face.
It's like, okay, this is a bit okay. Looking back at it now, it's like, it's a bit far fetched, but I'll let it slide.
Well, it's like the grenades to blow up the tank when you're fighting with Vulcan Raven.
When you want to get information from those types of games, it's just like you just have to keep reading a load of stuff.
Yeah, but it's all fully voice acted.
Yeah, and it was just so well, like the amount of dialogue.
So much detail. Also, it's the first game that we're going to come across that we experience. It's the first one that feels like a film.
Big time.
It opens like a James Bond film.
Yeah.
You've got this whole briefing. You see the submarine. He gets fired out, and it's just like, oh. I mean, years later, when I was actually finally sat down to play it properly, I was like, yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah.
In my brain, I'm going, all these pixelated hands and flat face. You can't beat these graphics.
No, yeah. And then you saw Metal Gear Solid 2.
And you're like, oh.
Okay.
Well, you look at the codec and you're like, their animated faces on the codec look better than the actual in-game.
Yeah, big time. That to me is still the best codec, the first Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
There's just something about angry snake face. When he gets really angry, you're like, no, I'm going to pay you back for Meryl.
Yeah, I mean, like
when he realizes, sorry, Sean, when he realizes it's liquid this entire time, Snake, did you like my sunglasses?
I just love the fact that they made him like a properly over the top, like you say, Harry, James Bond villain.
Yeah.
The whole storyline as it goes even further about, okay, hang on a minute, not only is he just a you could take him as like a stereotypical archetypal British villain, but oh, hang on a minute, he's my clone. And all the Geno Marmy are kind of clones as well. What's going on here? And then the whole thing, revelation after revelation, but it's not ham-fisted. It kind of develops quite nicely throughout the story.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, it's like when you find out that, okay, oh shit, I've got this virus that my supposed like doctor and friend gave to me because of like past stories in the franchise that kind of it's interesting to like find out about them, but you don't really need to know everything about his past because they pretty much cover it in the codec anyway.
Pretty much, yeah.
Like Zanzibar and Out of Heaven and all that sort of stuff. So you already feel like the game has got a fleshed out lore without you feeling kind of left in the dark about.
You don't need to play Metal Gear or Metal Gear.
You really don't, to be honest with you, because Big Boss never mentions once in any of those games, in either of those games, that Snake he is Snake's father. So that is something that they retcon for Metal Gear Solid. When Metal Gear Solid came out, I think it was 8 years. There was like an 8-year gap. And it pretty much is a soft reboot of the franchise. So you really do not need to play Metal Gear or Metal Gear 2 to understand what is going on. There may be a few things that you miss or might not quite understand. But it's one of those things like when they ended up, not to jump ahead, but, it's clear that they needed to flesh out Big Boss a little bit more, hence why he, when they did Metal Gear Solid 3, because when Big Boss in Metal Gear 1 and 2, he's just very much like I'm evil.
And it's like he's like a shadow.
Because it was released on the MSX, which was like a console Japan release only.
Yeah.
And it could not process loads of characters on screen at the same time. That's when Hideo came up with the idea, well, how about we make the premises of Metal Gear not to be seen?
Yeah.
And then little did he know, it ended up becoming like this massive franchise.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that last phone call right at the end of the credits.
Yeah.
And then you've got this conversation, and it's the president, and you're like,
and Solidus is really
and then it's like within that sort of small conversation gives you everything, like the burning questions you've got for 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they do such a good job, and to be fair, there was such a long time between one and two.
It's
like,
also
oh my god, there's so many questions.
It's also clever as well because when you look at the last act of that game, to throw the player's scent off of Miller being revealed to be Liquid, they make this big reveal with Naomi about Foxdie, and
exactly.
you know, you sort of don't think too much about what's going on with Miller, even though he's acting a little bit weird.
With Miller, there's when you go back and play it, there's certain times where
when he's in the hind, you can't call him.
Is off, and then you look back and go, oh, okay. Yeah. So the signs were there, but they were hidden in plain sight. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. But the game is clever enough to like make this big thing with Naomi happening at the time that you almost don't think about, you know, because she doesn't try to hide it. She phones you up when you're going back to the base, like the third bloody time with whatever version
there's
of
a lot of backtracking in that game. Yeah.
And that's when she reveals, no, I wanted revenge. I wanted to kill you. You know, you killed my benefactor, that being Big Boss, and you sent my brother home as a cripple. You know, and now look at him, he's this ninja thing, you know, he's like a shadow of his former self. Exactly. And I wanted revenge on you. And you just think, well, Snake's a bit of a prick, you know, it sort of puts into perspective, you know, your actions of Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2. That's where I think some of it can be a little bit lost. But like I said, they retconned it anyway. And then there's so much happening at the end of the game with, you know, the fight with Rex, the fight with Liquid, escaping with Otacon or Meryl, depending on whether you survive the torture or not.
Yeah.
And that you forget about Ocelot. So when that codec appeared, that conversation with the president, that being Solidus at the end of the credits appears, you're like, oh my god, yeah, Ocelot. I forgot about him. And you realise, oh my god, he's like a great big massive, he's going to be an important part going forward.
Well, yeah, and obviously considering, like, you know, the main tagline is tactical espionage action.
Yeah.
And Ocelot is like the catalyst to being like a double agent, triple agent, whatever you call him. But yeah, there's just so many layers to it that even now, like, you can still find new things to appreciate about it, and new story layers that just like make sense as an overall picture of like the game, rather than just thinking, oh right, let's just go and hide here and go guns blazing. Because I mean, the game lets you go. It's not like, it doesn't force you to play stealthily, but it rewards you if you do. You know what I mean?
It's almost like an instant death if you get caught. Because funny enough, that game actually gets easier the more you play it, because at the beginning you've got such a small life bar, you have limited resources, like you don't have a lot of ammunition, you don't have many rations, so you really do have to treat it like a stealth game. Do not get caught. If you are, it's more or less a game over.
That's survival stealth.
Yeah, basically. Obviously, it's a bit more lenient the longer you go on, and when you get to Metal Gear Solid 4 and, you know, the Phantom Pain and things like that, you know, the game basically says, listen, you can go in guns blazing if you want. You don't have to treat this like a stealth game. Okay, well, we all like Metal Gear Solid.
So, I mean, there's so much more to talk about that. But again, like you said about Final Fantasy, we could be here for hours talking about it. So,
big time, yeah.
Dino Crisis.
Oh, Dino Crisis,
okay.
Yeah. Sorry, guys, my kettle seems to be powered by fucking hamsters. Right. Cool.
Harry's joined us in some way, shape, or form.
He's frozen again. Oh, every time I come back, it goes.
How's your signal, Harry? A bit better?
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So, your next choice was Dino Crisis.
Yeah. And yeah, like, it used to be surprising because it should be Resident Evil. But Dino Crisis was the first one that I kind of came across that was like a real challenge. So in my mind, the game was really bloody difficult. But also having dinosaurs, it was only just sort of like a few years before we had Jurassic Park.
Yeah. So
it was definitely in the mind when this game came out. But it was also, I liked the fact that it had taken a leaf out of Silent Hill with multiple endings. My experience of the game is I got so far and then I couldn't find a key card.
Oh,
and then these are the days.
It's the story of my life when playing Resident Evil.
These are the days when you couldn't get a guide to the game, so it was like, I don't know.
No game facts.
Sod this. And then it wouldn't be for 4 or 5 years later that my mate would turn around and be like, Yeah, the key card, the Tyrannosaurus Rex eats the bloke, and it's like in the remains.
I have played Dino Crisis. I've never completed it. I think I remember the name of the character. It's Regina, isn't it? She had like red hair.
Regina,
Yeah,
Gabe, and I can't remember who the other character is, but Gabe's the proper arsehole in it.
Yeah, yeah.
But I love the fact that I just went for the easy ending, because it gives you the choice. It's like, should we just get out of here? Yeah, can we just get out of here now? But I also remember this room where you go into a computer mainframe. You go into a computer mainframe, and you've got to rewire something, and you've got a time limit before it releases gas into the room. And if you don't get it right, you just die and you get stuck in there.
Really?
The puzzles were just brutal to the point where it's just like, this is so difficult. This is why when you get through the whole challenge of the game and you get to that point where it's like, can we just get off this island? You're just like, yeah, can we just get off this island?
We don't want any more puzzles.
Plan. If you've been half eaten by a dinosaur, you can go fuck off over there and go and deal with whatever you think is going on. I'm going home.
Yeah.
The other survivors with me.
Yeah, admittedly, to my shame, I never played it, but I always knew of it, but I just never got round to it. I might give it a go now that you've mentioned it.
No, it's definitely well worth. I mean, I've replayed it again, and it's just like, I forgot how much fun it is fighting raptors, and it's just different. It's just different from the usual shambling zombies from Resident Evil. It was just like, oh fuck, Velociraptor.
Yeah.
2 was terrible. So yeah, it was a very short-lived series.
Or a lightning in the bottle.
You can actually unlock
It came out in Japan and never came out anywhere else. So what happened with that?
Dino Crisis 2?
3.
Oh, 3. Oh, yeah.
It got a trio of games.
Really? I had no idea.
Yeah.
You can actually unlock a Regina costume in Resident Evil 3.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You can get like a boutique key when you complete the game, and you can unlock a load of costumes, and one of them is like a Regina skin. So Jill Valentine looks like Regina.
So it's PS2, obviously. And I'm just going to count this franchise. I mean, the later games are good, but I think in terms of like a genesis of how they evolve through time and just the sheer magnitude of them for a PS2 generation is Grand Theft Auto.
That was my next one. Yes, that was my next one. Yeah.
So it's because I remember playing the first 2, and there was like GTA London as well back on the PS1. I probably should have put that as a PS1 as well, but never mind. And it was pretty cool. It was like the top-down view, and you basically spent most of the time driving around in the cars and stuff, and it was cool.
I mainly just went around and caused as much chaos as I possibly could on that old PlayStation game.
Yeah, so that was fun in itself. And then I remember I used to read, I don't know if you guys did as well, I was pretty sad, I used to read PS1, or PlayStation magazine.
Yeah. And you get like demo discs with them as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I distinctly remember that it was like the preview to GTA 3. And the one line that I remember specifically from that was, you can literally do anything you want.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, ooh, okay. So there's a linear story, not linear, but there's a story you can follow. But if you don't want to, you can just fuck around and cause carnage. And when you get to actually start playing it, and this is like minus the storyline, just the actual mechanics and the open world, and the fact you're pretty much in a living, breathing city. Your protagonist is mute, essentially. You kind of don't need him really to say anything, because the other peripheral characters and through your gameplay tell the story as it is. And then as you go through like the games, they start adding more stuff to it. Like Vice City for me was like, even though it was still on PS2, it was a massive jump up, not in terms of graphics, but just the 80s setting I thought was brilliant. And like the soundtrack for that, like when you listen to the radio and stuff, was just like, oh, this is so cool. The Miami setting, so it had a very much like Miami Vice kind of inspiration to it.
Scarface.
Exactly, Scarface particularly, yeah. And then you could do everything you could in the first game.
Tommy Vercetti's voiced by the late
great Ray Liotta, yeah. So that's when they started to really ramp up the cast as well, because they started to really get invested in the story, and you could tell that the people they weren't phoning it in; they were really treating it like a gangster movie kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then they added more mechanics, so like you could have like gang wars and like run your own businesses and stuff like that, and it was just like, well, you could just literally play it for hours on end, and you don't even have to do any real main missions. You can just go around and do all the little side quests, the rampages,
the radio,
and then
just rock radio, man.
Oh man,
listening to that on repeat.
Fuck yeah.
I literally just parked the car up and listened to the radio because because we're all metalheads here. Judas Priest, Slayer, Megadeth. I think Motorhead was on there. Just great. Anthrax. Literally just all on there. Just amazing soundtrack.
And then I also love the fact that if you 100% the game, you just get, I completed this game and all I got was this classy t-shirt.
Yeah. It's just things like Rockstar, very cheeky. So they can throw these things in there. And then just when you think it can't get any more epic, then San Andreas comes out a couple of years later, and all of a sudden you've gone from doing everything you could do in the first two games.
It's amazing how quick the turnaround was.
It was unbelievably quick. And I actually remember
DLC where they'd have to patch things and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Once it's out, it's out.
When they actually made games that actually worked properly.
Yeah. And the fact that they were starting work on it pretty much as soon as Vice City was released.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then with this one, your character, you can literally customize your character. So you can...
It's mad how much they squeezed into that game.
Yeah. Go to the gym, you can do little side bits like exercises, cycling. And then going into interior locations was actually a big step up, because before you couldn't really go inside many places, if at all. So they made it more interactive in that way. But they got Samuel Jackson as the main bit, Officer Tenpenny. So they were ramping it up again. And I just remember, especially with San Andreas, going sick off school. You had to queue up. It was like you had to get to game at 9 o'clock in the morning to make sure you got your copy, because it was so grandiose.
If you didn't, you weren't going to get one for like
no.
Exactly. And I remember just getting it, coming back and literally playing it all day, and then all day again the next day, and all day.
All you had to do was follow the train, CJ.
Oh yeah, it was like, that was
the worst mission in the entire franchise.
Yeah.
Obviously, San Andreas is critically, and I think usually within it's usually regarded as the best one out of the entire series. It's not my personal favourite. My personal favourite is Vice City, like Sean.
Same. Vice City. It's nothing like being Ray Liotta as your main character.
Yeah.
And the whole being able to organise the businesses and doing all the rackets, that was so implemented so well in Vice City.
Yeah.
It's almost like it took everything that 3 had and just improved every aspect of it.
Yeah.
The game that was on my list was actually Grand Theft Auto 3, even though it's not my favourite.
Same here.
When I first played it, I love Vice City. I like San Andreas and the rest of them. But GTA 3, when I first played that was like, oh my god, this is unbelievable. Because I did play Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2 in London.
Yeah.
And then to see it go from that to GTA 3, frankly, those games. I've never played them bar than like back in the day, and I didn't realize you could do missions on them and things like that. I just went and killed people, and so that sounds really sadistic. I just went around and caused as much chaos as possible.
Murder everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
On my next list, because I don't really have anything to add to that, Sean, because you pretty much covered everything.
We've neglected to mention that the PlayStation 2 was such a jump.
Yeah, it was a huge jump.
Yes.
Huge jump
in quality from PlayStation to PlayStation 2, which is insane.
Well, look at the 2 franchises we recently mentioned. If you look at Final Fantasy IX and Metal Gear Solid, PlayStation 2 comes out, and you've got Metal Gear Solid 2 and Final Fantasy X. It's night and day.
Yeah, and also
such a huge jump. Massive
and also, you
jump.
could play DVDs as well, which was quite
and the PlayStation 2, I think, was backwards compatible as well. Mm-hmm. So you could still play PlayStation games on it. The next game I will have on my list, and I won't go on about it too long because I don't think either of you have really played it. It's a game that came out on the Dreamcast, and it was a game called Shenmue.
Oh, Shenmue, I know about it.
My first experience of that was when you brought it around.
Yeah, we played it on the Dreamcast. It was on the Dreamcast. But you got to bear in mind, this was round about a year before the PlayStation 2 came out. And this was my first introduction to like that next generation of consoles. Yeah. And Shenmue, to say it was far ahead of its time would be a dramatic understatement. Obviously, it's quite dated now, and the pacing a lot of people would find it very frustrating. But I just thought it was amazing how you could pretty much talk to anybody. I was really invested in the storyline, even though it's your typical Quest for Revenge storyline. For some reason, it just really hooked me. You could go into like an arcade and play like old school Sega games in there. Yeah, I mean, it just looked amazing as well. The soundtrack was great. I think it was the first game I ever remember having quick time events, but they were very punishing. You had to be super quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a fantastic game. And that game was one of many reasons why the Dreamcast sort of fell apart, because they kind of put all their eggs in one basket. They were hoping that game to be a massive reason to buy the Dreamcast, and for a short period of time it was. But then the PlayStation 2 came out, and it just
annihilated it.
It just destroyed everything in its path. The GameCube couldn't get close to it. The Dreamcast died a death. Even when the Xbox came out, it just couldn't quite capture popularity of the PlayStation 2. Yeah. See that I think I should point out that I don't have many Nintendo games on here, because I was Mega Drive, then I was pretty much PlayStation right through till like now. I've gone back and played a lot of these games, and I can see why they're so, highly regarded, like the Legend of Zelda series and Metroid and Mario and all of that. But obviously when you go back, they don't have. I mean, you appreciate them and you can see why they're so highly regarded, but it doesn't quite have that wow factor with you.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose at the same time I did play Zelda 64, and I was playing at the time that it was like a mind-blowing, oh wow, but I'm not. I just never really had that strong feelings about Zelda.
Yeah,
I enjoyed the game. I enjoyed the game at the time. It was cool being able to ride a horse and do your own sort of exploration.
I think with Zelda as well, my first introduction to Ocarina of Time was actually on the 3DS. They did some graphical enhancements to it and some gameplay tweaks. So the water temple's nowhere near as bad as it is on the N64. Yeah. I remember when I first got Fallout 3.
Yeah.
And it's more, I mean, I think the game is amazing. But the moment from that game that always sticks in my mind is when you first leave the vault for the first time.
That's exactly what I wrote on my notes.
Really?
Yeah.
Like and
it's the light flare, it hurts your eyes, and then you got that sense of, wow.
Yeah, it's just unreal. And I know everyone, we can all take the mick out of Bethesda and things like that, but Fallout 3 to me was a really big deal when I first played it.
Yeah.
This idea where it kind of nudges you in the right direction, but you don't have to do it. You can go pretty much anywhere on this map, go out there and explore. That game's had so much longevity with me, because with the PC, you've got like the Nexus Forum now, which are releasing mods, and you can make it graphically look amazing. You can put so many other enhancements to it now that I still, like, once every 2 years, I'll pop out Fallout, I'll play Fallout 3 and get like a good 60 hours out of it.
Oh, yeah.
And that first time when you leave the vault and you're greeted to that wasteland, it's the first time you're exposed to, natural sunlight, because you weren't born in the vault, but you pretty much grew up in there since you were a baby.
Yeah.
And that moment will forever be embedded into my mind. And then you can see Megaton off in the distance. I think most people tend to go to Megaton first, and that's where you have your first dilemma. Do you want to blow Megaton up, or do you want to, do the right thing, I guess, because the choice is yours. You can be an absolute arsehole in Fallout 3. Or you can be, a hero, essentially. The funny thing is, if you choose to be, because if you blow up Megaton, you immediately become evil. Your karma goes to as evil as it can.
This is what I did the first time I played it.
Yeah. But if you give, like, a homeless person just a bunch of water, you can literally just get your karma back up to being a good guy. Yeah, I nuked an entire civilization, but I've given a homeless person some purified water. I'm like, I'm a good guy.
All is forgiven from genocide.
Yeah.
Aren't you responsible? Oh, but you gave that homeless person some water.
That's fine.
Fair enough.
This is how karma works in this game.
Hey, you blew up Megaton.
Have some water, mate. Don't worry about it.
For me, it's probably one of my most misinterpreted games from my point, because for ages I didn't get it, because I was like, it's just another first-person shooting game.
Yeah.
And then you start playing it and you suddenly go, this isn't just any old first-person shooting game. I've never really been so, like, wrong in the marketing, or I don't know what gave me the wrong impression. about it. No, that's maybe because I knew nothing about Fallout. I didn't know Fallout 1 or 2.
No,
yeah, exactly.
What they were.
Yeah.
So my first real introduction to it was Fallout 3, and it was like, oh, the VAT system. This is actually much more. I've not done anything like this before.
Although I do
and then
find
you end up relying on it because shooting outside of VATs is just absolutely pointless.
Well, I like the perk system as well, because
the perk system was cool.
There's so many different varieties of, again, how it allows you to play the game kind of how you want it, but it gives you, like Harry said, little nudges, or like you said, little nudges of going back to like.
I also like the fact that you can pretty much follow any NPC about. Like these guys were offering me a job to go and do something, and we're going to meet them somewhere else. And what they do is they leave you and wander off towards wherever it is, and they have to make their own journey. And if they get killed along the way, that mission ends.
That's it.
That happened. I was like following along with them. I was like, well, safety in numbers, and we've got to take my bandits, and all died. And I was like, oh, okay. And it just said mission like failed or like whatever. It was like the other alternative route. I was like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't have followed them.
It's also the first game I remember getting DLC for as well, because they released those. I can't ever remember a game before that where I actually did DLC. And the DLC overall, from what I remember, I mean, that alien one made me want to bang my fucking head on the table. Mothership Zeta.
Which is such a shame, because you see like the fine source, and you think, oh, this is going to be interesting. A little bit of sci-fi involved here. It was rubbish. Yeah,
it was absolute crap.
All it is another set of like alien weapons.
Yeah, that's it.
The other one, Operation Anchorage, it's just there so that you can get power armor without having to get to level 20 to use power armor.
Yeah,
and then
it also increased the level cap to 30, which was good.
Yeah, and then they had the storyline beyond.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were and frankly, the original ending of Fallout 3 was a massive letdown. So I think that's another reason why they did Broken Steel as well. To me, the best one is Point Lookout.
Point Lookout was great. Yeah. It almost felt like.
And I quite like the Pit as well. I thought the Pit was pretty good as well.
Yeah,
I like the Pit for the first 10 minutes. That moment you suddenly get everything getting taken away from you, and you're now like, oh crap, I've got.
And they throw you out into the steel.
It really feels like Escape from New York. It's got that real vibes about it. I was like, oh shit, I'm in a penal colony and I've got no weapons, and I now have to. But the thing is that peril lasts about 15 minutes, and then you start picking up stuff and.
You know, the funny thing is about the Pit, it somehow makes you miss the comfort of the capital wasteland.
The wasteland, I want to see the green haze. I don't want to get around, but it's like claustrophobic almost, isn't it? Yeah. Well, it's survivalist as well, so it's like, it's every person for themselves.
Yeah.
And then not only that, then you've got the bloody monsters to deal with, and the feral ghouls, and like the little laws about them, and then like the super mutants, and you're like, what the hell? These are like these big green Hulk looking creatures, but
the worst monsters bar none to fight in the game are the super mutant overlords.
Oh god.
They're like the final difficulty level of the suit, because there's the normal super mutant, then there's the brute, there's the master, and then there's the overlord. They kind of got like a hunchback look to them.
Yeah,
they've always got like these stupidly powerful, because
then there's also the big
Behemoths, there's only a couple of them, and I've never really found that difficult. I'd sooner fight a behemoth than an overlord.
To be honest, the easy thing about the behemoths is if you manage to find an alcove, and they can't actually get to you, and you just shoot with them.
Yeah. Exactly.
If you have a fat man and a minion,
just shoot a fat man in its face, and I've done with it.
Or you pick up that one that shoots like 3 fat men.
So yeah, Fallout 3 was my big. I mean, I'm sure there were others on the PlayStation. I mean, I would say Red Dead Redemption, but. I kind of already had that with GTA, so it just felt like the next natural step for me.
And it was great and iconic for its own reasons, but again, it didn't, because we'd already, like you say, been used to the GTA series and how open world that was.
It's sort of getting to the point, because you're a lot old. We're older now, so it just sort of gets to the point where it's. I'm not saying that you expect or demand more, but you just get used to seeing it. Yeah,
a bit more comfortable this time. I mean, I have the cowboy setting and like the Wild West and stuff like that. But it didn't really go, holy shit. It was more just, wow, this is bloody cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh fuck, Harry, we forgot to talk about Silent Hill 2.
Yeah, that's somebody who said we were going to
go
come
back to it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to put the cut in here, but I mean, yeah.
Hello, Nerdaholics.
Yeah, I mean, there was when I first played it, blew my little mind, especially that opening scene when he's staring into the mirror.
Yeah.
And then he's in the cut scenes in it. All the cut scenes in that game were just like,
the game still looks amazing.
Wow.
It still looks so good. Don't put the HD remaster is crap. It's such a poor man's remaster. But the PlayStation 2 version, or if you can get like a decent version of the PC port working, that game still looks incredible to this day. Yeah.
There's just like an overwhelming sense of dread throughout the whole game. That there's no like real let up. And you can say that about Resident Evil, and fair enough. But for me, this seemed more like it was just because I suppose like it was more sort of varied, and everything was just dark and foggy, and there was always that kind of looming threat around. And especially when like you go into somewhere and it goes all quiet, you're like, oh, here we go. It's a proper like horror. I say trope, but it worked. You know, they did
a clever thing, and that was they took a simple thing that you could find anywhere, a radio. And then the static.
Yeah,
and people, I don't know whether you find static unnerving or uncomfortable. It's not a nice sound.
No, it's an awkward sound, isn't it? So it plays on that.
It really reminds me of when this motion tracker goes off in Aliens. It's that moment. It's that,
exactly.
That you suddenly go, shit.
What is that?
You're watching the screen. You can't see where this thing is, but the radio's telling you something is there, and you're like, where's the got legs?
Silent Hill 2 was the first and probably only horror game. I felt really, really uncomfortable playing it. Like really, really uncomfortable. You know, the fog, which was a clever way of masking like the draw distance, that ended up adding so much more to the game. The way the monsters look, like the static radio. I know I talk a lot about soundtracks, but the soundtrack was amazing.
Yeah.
I just thought the storyline was so clever as well. It was a real deep dive into like James Sunderland's psyche. If you're into like your horror games, highly, highly, highly recommend Silent Hill 2.
Yeah, likewise.
The game is a masterpiece. You can find so many videos on YouTube of people deep diving into it.
It's a sequel that took everything that the first one did, and just improved on every aspect,
every way, shape, and form.
I think the first game's a good game. I just think it's a bit too difficult. It's the first game is a really hard game.
Yeah, I also much prefer the more psychological horror approach they took with Silent Hill 2. Because Silent Hill 1 and 3, it's all about, you know, it's horror, but there's about cults and things like religious cults and things like that. Whereas Silent Hill 2 is literally like it's almost like a twisted character study of the main
personal demons.
Yeah. But you see the way the town affects other people as well. Like you have Guy Eddie, who sees the town differently. You have the woman, I can't remember her name, but you know, she had a terrible upbringing with her father abusing her and things like that. She sees the town differently. But the young girl Laura, she just sees it as a regular town. She hasn't done anything wrong or anything like that. So she doesn't see the monsters. She doesn't see the town as like this big, foggy, you know, desolate hellhole.
It feels like it's taken out of like a Stephen King book, or what he would have. If it was like based on a Stephen King novel, then that it would make sense, and it's like it's got that inspiration, like the sort of Shining kind of vibe to it.
The game designers were heavily influenced by Francis Bacon, the artist.
Yeah. If
you look up Francis Bacon, I mean, you can see where some of the monster designs came from, because Bacon would like do all the twisting faces and things like that, like very disturbing, and they took a lot of influence from him as well. Yeah, and you remember the first introduction to what's now called Pyramid Head. Yeah, it's just like the most terrifying thing ever. yeah. Just a great game.
Oh, Dead Space.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. Yeah.
It's just, what I like about it is that you've got everything on the screen is not a HUD.
Yeah,
it's on the character. So the life bars, the light on the back, and you've got the energy for the thing. And then when you get the map come up, it comes up as a 3D and you're like looking at it, and there's definitely a real attention to detail in that first Dead Space game. And not that I played 2 or 3 because I gave up after halfway through 1.
I'm telling you now, 2 and 3 are nowhere near as good as the first one.
No.
In my humble opinion.
Other than the really horrible eye scene.
They're decent games, but the first one is something special.
Yeah.
I got as far as the tentacle dragging me down the corridor.
Yeah.
I couldn't kill the alien.
Yeah.
I couldn't kill this thing. It kept on regenerating. And after that, I was just like, no, this game's shitting me up too much. I can't do this.
You introduced it to me. You lent it to me on the play. Yeah.
It is a really good game. But there was just part of me that there was just so many cool bits to it. Like when you go into the out of the airlock and you go into the space sections and and you can't hear anything.
Yeah.
And then that's and you do the whole sort of flying to one end and then you like land and then you can put the magnetic boots on and you can walk around. There was just so many cool sort of little elements that just made that game really, really interesting. But I also, that whole, talking about cinematics, that whole beginning bit feels so cinematic when he's just sitting there, you're hearing the briefing, the ship's walking, what's happened?
The first time you play it, I mean, the thing that really made me like, oh God, like, it's like, because it's very quiet, but then when a monster attacks you,
it's really loud.
It's just really loud, like it's really in your face. Like, oh my God, I can't stand it in a good way. I can't stand it.
Yeah.
It really does get under your skin. And it just sort of makes you panic as well, because these things, they're not like zombies slowly dragging themselves towards you or something like all those monsters in, even though we've just said it's amazing, but the monsters in Silent Hill 2, let's face it, they're not exactly difficult to avoid, are they?
No, you can just sort of run away from them.
These things legit want to tear you to pieces.
And I like the fact, the moment you get in, the guys are starting to think there's something wrong, so they send you off to go and fix something, locking you away on your own.
I'm just a mechanic.
Look through the window and then get mullered, and you're just like...
It takes influences from Aliens, it takes influences from Event Horizon, it's got
big time. But it's definitely in my top 5 favourite horror games of all time. Easily.
No, carry on. Sure. I'll listen to it back later.
All right, yeah. We've talked about it a bit on the video previously, but I'll just do it quite briefly now. Mass Effect. Now, some of the context of this is, so I was PS1 and I was PS2, and then I shadily jumped ship to Xbox 360, mainly for monetary reasons at the time, because I remember the PS3 being about £100 more expensive. So I was like, well, I want the next.
Yeah, there was a bit of a price gap.
Yeah. The box included in the game, so it was Halo 3, and I was like, well, it's a big flagship game, I'll give it a go. Wasn't really that interested in it, to be honest with you. And then another game in there was Mass Effect. I'd never heard, obviously, of like, I didn't really see any like reviews about it or read about it. It was like pretty much just totally fresh to me.
Yeah.
Looking at the cover, I was like, okay, set in space. It's got some funky aliens on there, but I wasn't quite expecting just how deep and influenced by all my sort of favourite sci-fi shows and movies that it was. Not only that, but it kind of had it definitely had RPG elements involved. And for me, that was the biggest selling point for me as I kept playing it, because it wasn't just about going to space shooting aliens, but you had choices, and that was the biggest, one of the biggest kind of driving factors behind my enjoyment of it was the choice mechanics. That actually mattered. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't a case of, just say something nice and say something horrible. It affected not only for that game but for the franchise as it went on, which I thought was cool, apart from the end of Mass Effect 3, but we won't talk about that. It just blew me away when you first get to the Citadel, and it's just this huge, obviously it's like a space station,
it feels really big. It feels really
and it's got the kind of all the little like sci-fi, again I'm gonna say sci-fi tropes, but not in a bad way. And it was just so much fun, and it just came totally out of left field for me, because I thought, it must be included with the console because it's it's all right, but it's not great. But it actually turned out to be one of my favourite games of all time. As I kept banging on about it to you two, because obviously you guys had the PS3 and it hadn't come out yet for the PS3. It was an Xbox exclusive. So all that time I was like, I
remember you were really badgering. You were really badgering.
I was pissing you guys off about it. Let's be honest.
So my introduction was Mass Effect 2, because I had a PlayStation 3, and they had like the comic book strip at the beginning where you could make your choices which would carry over to the second game. But no, Mass Effect 2 definitely had a huge wow factor with me. And it's exactly the same reason why you said it's because it gave you this idea that your choices really, truly mattered. And they did at that point. They did.
They did for a time anyway. And most of Mass Effect 3, they sort of did to an extent with like some of the more so Mass Effect 2 than 1 going into 3, I would say. Whether the intro for it, when you find out that okay, you've been sent to Eden Prime, I think the planet was called. And it seems like you're just on like a regular kind of rescue reconnaissance mission. And again, not to give anything too much away, but if you've played it, you already know what I'm talking about. But you think you're after Saren as well, you don't know at the time, but when you're playing it back, you realise what's going on. But at the time, when you're playing it for the first time, and you see this massive fucking ship come down, and you think, oh shit, that's a ship, we must have loads of aliens inside or whatever. And then you find out, no, it's this thing called a Reaper, and it's actually its own sentient being, and it wants to, at the time anyway, assimilate all life and just destroy everything in the galaxy because there's a cycle every 50,000 years, and it just
the game does an amazing job slowly peeling away.
Exactly.
That, there's something much bigger than you could, like what Sovereign says, something much bigger than you can even begin to comprehend. That conversation you have with Sovereign on Vermeer is when it's a bit like that's what we talked about earlier, the Psycho Mantis moment where it completely flips it on its head.
Exactly.
And you realise this is like you said, this is something really, really big. And they make it feel like, it makes you feel uneasy as a player playing it, because it's like this hunt for to stop Saren from getting a hold of the Geth, and you almost forget about the Reapers a little bit. She occasionally brings them up, but then when you realise they've done this before time, at that point, obviously Mass Effect 3 retcon that, but it was such a massive reveal that these things have existed before. It's almost like before time itself.
I was going to say that it's very much a Lovecraftian inspired thing with the Reapers, because, like you said, and like Sovereign says, we're so far beyond your understanding. We permit you to live because we just do, because we can. But we're going to tear down everything just because. And that's what I preferred when you get the revelation later on that it's to do with chaos and all that bollocks. I just like the idea that these creatures just do this because. And you don't really know why, they just
but they don't tell you. It's like it's
just what we do.
Yeah, it's just what we do. And I'm not going to lower myself explaining it to you.
Exactly, because you're just these puny little ants that get on our nerves and sort of pollute the galaxy. We're just going to clear you all out.
But they see
organic life.
Basically that they just want to purge you. They want to purge and harvest you.
Harvest and literally they want to do. Reapers that are made out of like the civilizations that they've conquered and exterminated. And then the opening of Mass Effect 2 is basically the death of the main character, sort of, because you get this massive attack from these huge ships that you don't really know why, because they're not Geth ships.
It's quite literally Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, pretty much, It is. I love it. It's like,
you get the Cowboy Ashley Maru at the beginning of Wrath of Khan, and you think, hang on a minute, everyone's dead. Oh no, it's a simulation. Although it becomes a literal one because Shepard does die and then becomes alive again through the lab.
He's basically resurrected with technology.
No, I agree with you. Mass Effect 2, particularly the second one for me because it's the first one I played. Even though it's weird, it's probably the only game that I've mentioned so far that didn't really do anything for me at first, but when I really did give it a chance, it was just like, I just could not stop playing it. I think I completed it in the space of like a week. I was like that invested into it.
And the acting
then I played it again straight away afterwards. Because you wanted to see what would happen, try and figure out
what other options. How else can I fuck up this story and get everyone killed?
Basically,
What happens? Who is in the next game if everyone dies?
But Mark Meir and Jennifer Hale both put really good performances in as Shepard. If you can choose one or the other, I generally prefer Mark Meir because I think his delivery is a little bit more sarky, especially when you're Renegade.
Hey, the council can kiss my ass.
This is a big, stupid jellyfish.
That being said, one's got the best main storyline.
Yeah, well, I think he's got the best focal villain as well, because Saren, even though technically, okay, he's a villain, but the bigger villains are the Reapers and Sovereign, but he's more of a focal point and a physical representation of just everything that the Reapers are trying to accomplish. And he's brilliant.
And what they do to people when they're doing indoctrination.
Yeah.
Mass Effect 2 kind of fell into that RPG trap, which is quite common, is in which the side content is a lot more entertaining than the actual main story itself.
Yeah. It just adds so much to the lore and the background of everything going on at the time.
Another great moment in Mass Effect is when you find the Vigil on Ilos, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And I mean, usually in Mass Effect, I skip a lot of the investigating. You know, you can select investigate, and you can find out more about the lore.
Yeah.
Because I've played it so many times, I don't really do that anymore, save unless I'm introducing it to someone like a reader.
Yeah.
But whenever I get to the Sovereign moment or the Vigil conversation, I literally listen to everything, because it still gives you that sense of dread.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And then you have the theme Vigil playing in the background as well. Just so good.
Yeah.
Mass Effect 1 and 2, great games. Mass Effect 3, great game until it shits the bed in the last 15 minutes.
Yeah, until they get to
You were so close. You were so close.
Damn you, Marauder Shields.
I think this next game I'm going to mention, it's a masterpiece. It's one of the greatest games ever made, and that is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
I was going to say that as well.
It's in my top 5 favourite games of all time, period. So I love everything about that game. But I will say this, it has by far, and we could do a whole video alone on The Witcher 3, but it has by far the best DLC I've ever played, period, to the point where I would say it's better than anything the main game has to offer, and that's the Hearts of Stone DLC.
Yeah, 100%.
That DLC is, it should be a blueprint for what all DLC, and to be fair, Blood and Wine's also really good as well. But that DLC should be a blueprint to what DLC should be going forward. You get a ton of extra content.
Value for money.
Amazing storyline. You get a good solid 30 or 40 extra hours, and it's at a very decent price as well. Yeah. You don't feel like you're buying the game again just to get a few extra hours of content. But the villain is just outstanding. From the voice acting to the story to the way Geralt... It's not a villain you can beat by conventional means. You know, you can't stab it with a sword or anything like that. It's like a game of 4D chess you're playing with this villain.
Good weapon.
And it really is, you know, The Witcher likes to go on about picking the lesser of two evils. The ending of this is the perfect example of that. You know, do you want to help the guy who really isn't a good person at all, and he really isn't, or do you want to save him because the guy is pulling the strings on him is, you could argue, is far worse than he ever will be.
Evil incarnate.
It's basically like a physical incantation, you know, of like, he's basically like the devil, I should put it. But Geralt just can't quite figure him out. Like, he's asking, are you like I'm talking as if I'm trying to avoid spoilers because I really want people to check this out. But Geralt just doesn't understand it. Like, are you a djinn? Are you a demon? And the guy's like, do you really want to know? And Geralt's like, yes. And he's like, you know what? I'm not going to tell you, because anyone that does know who I am are either dead or meets a fate even worse than that. So I'm going to spare you your wish and not grant this one for you. Yeah. And it just sends this like shiver down you. And even Geralt, who's not really... really intimidated by anything. Even he's like, fucking hell, all right.
And he's fought a lot of weird creatures. For him to be intimidated by that, you know shit is going to go down.
I'll say this, the villain's called Gaunter O'Dim, and he is the guy who appears at pretty much the very beginning of the game in White Orchard, when you arrive at that inn and you're introduced to Gwent and you're looking for Yennefer, and he's the guy that sits with you at the end and points you in the right direction of where to go find her. He lets you know that she's at the Nilfgaardian garrison. They just, even from the very beginning of the game, they plant that seed, like, watch it, he's going to come back. We've got big plans for this guy.
Yeah.
And just outstanding.
Because I've got that on there. On my notes, I've just put Geralt, enough said. And I just think it's a really nice introduction to the world of The Witcher. If you haven't read the books beforehand, then it's a nice compliment. It gives you enough backstory from just like, you know, different letters and stuff like that, and mentions.
You do not need to play Witcher 1 and 2 to understand what's going on.
Exactly.
The budget for The Witcher 3 was quite small as well.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I remember remember that game Destiny that came out, and they were bragging this game it cost $500 million to make, and then when you play it, you're like, where did all that money go?
Yeah, where's the story? It definitely didn't go on the storyline.
Well, there's no bloody storyline really. It's only fun when you play it with other people, and even then it's like, okay.
Do you know what? Those kind of games are only fun for the first week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When everybody's involved and playing and has no idea what the fuck's going to happen.
It just felt like a very uninspired game. It didn't really do anything new.
No.
Like the main selling point is it cost $500 million to make. That was like, because I remember people were going on about that, like that's a big thing. I was like, well, that's not going to make me buy it. You know.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean,
whereas
how much money? Sorry,
sorry, Sean. So whereas The Witcher 3, I think had like a third, not even a third of the budget of Destiny, and look what they managed to churn out.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I just think the scope of the game in general, not just on sort of the open world of it, but the fact that you can do contracts, you can do side missions, you can be a herbalist if you want. You know, there's so much to it. You could spend hours and hours and hours just doing side quests and still be entertained by it. Mm-hmm. And then if you want to, you can go, right, let's crack on a bit more with the main story. All right, let's just do these contracts here. You know, so I've never get bored of it in any stretch of the imagination. It's just like, it's totally engaging.
I'll love you and leave you now. And
mate. Good chatting,
about
mate.
the 22nd, yeah? No, take care, guys. It was really good. I think I can't.
Maybe that would be the intro instead.
Bye. All right, then, lads. Take care now. Have a good night, yeah?
And you, mate.
All the best now. Bye-bye. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.